Okay, it's time to get the pistons and rod installed. Got the rods all checked out by the machine shop. New bushings put in. Straightness checked. The roundness of the bores checked. Everything checked out perfect. So there should be no problems with this. And to do this, the piston is marked. When you put this onto the rod, you have a front onto the piston right here. The caps are numbered for 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see the number there, number 1. That goes to the camshaft side of the engine. So, seeing as how I've got my engine upside down, I'll put the front aerial upside down. This will be the front. The numbers here to the cam side. So this rod will be installed just like that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, instead of put assembly grease on these, I'm going to oil these. Seeing how this rod, a lot of rods, you have a pressure feed system. You'll have a hole drilled all the way up here to pressure feed oil pressure to the pin. On this Super M, it just depends on the oil flying around in the crankcase. You have a hole in here. It'll come in, migrates into the pin. I'm afraid if I put assembly grease in here without a pressure feed to this pin and bushing, I'm afraid that could cause a damming effect and not let the oil into here. So I'm just going to oil this. Feedback would be great, pros and cons, what you guys think. You know, different people have different ideas. But anyway, instead of assembly grease, we will be doing just an oil film on these. So, okay, let's get started. Well, got everything oiled up here, ready to go. It's really slippery when you get that on rubber gloves. But anyway, got a keeper in here. Keep the pin from sliding through when I install that. Front marked right here. I'll just tip that upside down. That'll be the front. Stamp mark on the rod. That'll be to the cam side. So this thing will go together just like this. And these pins are pretty tight fit. I mean, like 5/10 thousandths of a fit. Anyway, it takes a little bit sometimes to get these started straight. They got to go in just perfect. So if you don't get them perfect, you can sit there and fight with them a little bit. Okay, got her started there. Get the rod lined up. Okay, there we go. Full floating type pin on the rod and piston, so everything is good. And we'll see if we can get the last keeper in. Okay, there we go. Front of engine. Rod stamped to the cam side. So that's the way we put them together. Now I'll go through, we'll get the rest of these together. Then we'll, next step, we'll get the rings put on them. Okay, got the rods all installed on the pistons. Everything went together the way it's supposed to. So the next operation we're going to do is start installing the rings on these pistons. First off, we got the oil control ring at the upper and bottom sleeve. 2 compression rings. It's really hard to tell, but usually rings are marked for top. These here got a dot on the top on the 2 compression, so that'll be up on the piston. Now notice this one, absolutely no marking at all. Looks like a square cut ring from what I can see, and shouldn't make any difference which way that goes on. See no tapers, no bevels. Nothing indicates the top or bottom on that. So, and to install the rings, I got this fancy little tool here that I picked up at a swap meet. They call it a Zim number 202 piston ring expander. I don't know if you guys can make it out, but give $5 for this. I couldn't pass it up. Neat little tool. We'll show you how that works, putting the rings in and stuff. So let's get this thing clamped in the soft jaws in the vise, and we'll start putting these rings on. Okay, piston clamped in the vise, got the soft jaws in place, protects the rod. Nice and sturdy, so should be no problem installing these. First one is the oil control ring. We'll put this on. I'm going to put the gap to the back side here. We'll just get that fit over. Next off is, we got two skinny rings. One goes on top, one goes on bottom. I'm going to put the gaps on these this way to start with. We'll just roll it into the second groove down. Get her in there, and then we'll go down to the bottom side of the oil control ring, and we'll just spin that around in there. Get her in position. Okay, got the bottom one in. All the gaps are inside where they belong. And we'll get the top one in. And again, we'll kind of we'll skip a groove, but we'll do that one first, and then we'll go down and start her on the top of the oil control ring. Okay, that'll come together good, so like it. Next up is one of the compression rings. We'll look and make sure we've got the dot. There's the dot. We'll cradle it into the expander, put the notches in there, rest it on the outside flanges. You just expand it and slide her over. That will go into the next one down. That one, again, find the dot, put it in the expander. Next groove. And the top one. Wonderful tool. Saves on the fingers. Don't have to worry about breaking rings. A lot of times guys will just take them with their thumbs. By the time you do about 4 pistons like that, you're pretty skinny on the height on the thumbs. So anyway, we'll get the rest of the rings on and get ready for installing these in the block. Okay, rings are all installed. Next step is to get prepped for sticking them in the block. I've got the rod bearings out. Again, 10 thousandths over. They're all good. I got to clean them up a little bit yet. Make sure the dust and dirt's off them before I install them. So what we'll do, we'll get the bearings installed on the rods and the caps. We'll get the ring compressor out, get that all set up, ready to go. And going to have to oil up the rings real good. I like to oil the piston rings before I put them in. Make sure there's oil on the stuff there. Get the ring end gap staggered. You don't want them all in line. You want kind of staggered, otherwise you get compression leak by. So anyway, I'll get them bearings cleaned up, get them installed on the rods, and we'll start prepping these for installation in the block. Got the bearings all cleaned up, installed in the caps and in the rods. I did the same thing with the rod bearings I did with the mains. Got the ring compressor all lined up, ready to go. There's a certain way that goes on. You can see how the 2 bands here towards the bottom, and the bottom has these knockouts in it. So when you set that on top of the cylinder, this don't have a tendency to slide in. And then you got the hammer here. Squatch Jr. was kind enough to borrow it to me. And what you do with this, especially designed for installing pistons, set it all in, take and hit the piston in till the rings are down, and you're good to go. So we'll get the rings all oiled up, get the expander on, and get them ready to slide in the block. Okay, first off, we'll get everything oiled up real good here. I like to give her a pretty good shot of oil in there. And just work that all around. Make sure them rings are coated inside out all over. I don't think you can get too much oil on here. It'll either leach out or burn off when it starts. Everything will be well lubricated before it gets going. Probably one of them rare cases where if a little does a little good, a whole lot will do a whole lot of good, but I don't think you can really overdo it. But make sure you got everything well lubricated, stuff like that. It helps them slide in easier. Then we'll clamp her down in the vise with the soft jaws. And I like to make sure that I get a stagger on all my rings here. And what I do, some guys say go with the pins with your gap this way, and then the other one the other way and this way. I usually do it in thirds. Otherwise, in my opinion, you got two of them in line here with only one sealing. If you do it like in thirds, probably a little bit off center of this. I'll do this one this way. I get this one this way. And I'll stagger this one over here. So I do approximately 120 degrees apart from each other. Some guys say that in all actuality, as these things run in the rings can rotate into pistons, could end up any place. But anyway, I'm not sure about that theory, but that's the way I do this. Then we'll get the ring expander on. The hands are a little oily, so I'll just get a little bit of a residual inside there. We'll put her on, and what this will do, will collapse them rings down, so it makes it a lot easier going in the block. Okay, that piston should be ready to be installed. Okay, went through, I oiled up the sleeve, piston to the front, and just to verify again, the stamping on the rod goes to the cam side. So we should be set to put this thing in. Okay, everything's in position, arrow to the front. And if everything works according to the book, this should slide right in with the hammer. Okay, went good. Now I'm not going to go way down. What I got the crank throw down as far as it'll go right now. I'll stop right there. I'll flip this engine over, and that way I'm not banging around in that freshly ground crank journal. So we'll get this flipped over and do a clearance check and see how things turn out there. Okay, let's do a clearance check. I've got the plastic gauge already installed on the bearing there. The reason I put it on the rod probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference because that's so stiff with the new rings and stuff. But I figure if I do there, your weight is going to be down. If I put her up here, especially if you're checking clearance on a piston that's wore in, just the weight of your piston might give you an erroneous reading there. So I always put it on the rod part, seeing how's that down. We'll put the cap on, torque her down, take her off, and see what our clearance is. We'll try not to turn this if possible. Okay, bolt torque on these are 53 foot-pounds. Hopefully that didn't affect my clearance, but we'll see what we ended up with here. Hopefully you make it out right there, and we'll see what we got. Mach 2000s. Looking good to me. Anyway, we'll clean that off. We'll get it back together, put a little assembly lube on there, and 3 more to go. We'll show you what things look like when we get them all installed. Piston number 2. Okay, we'll see what we got for clearance on number 2 here. I would say we're right on 2 thousandths. I like it. Top end of specs is 0.0037, and I'm on the low side of midway on my spec range. So we'll get that cleaned off, and we'll finish this one up. Okay, got her all greased up with assembly oil stuff, and we'll get this one torqued on, finished up, and see if she spins. One thing I'm going to cover on here too is fold over locks. I'm sure you guys have heard someplace in the past about fold over locks. Anyway, with this system here, you put your fold over lock on first, your flat washer, and then you put it in. You make sure these tabs are in between the raised portion of that cap. Then you tighten her down. When everything is tightened in, that'll keep her from spinning right here, and you just fold the tab over on top. I won't do any fold overs until I get this thing totally together and stuff, just in case I got to take her apart, and that'll be the last procedure I do. Now we'll see if she spins. It's stiff enough, it's hard to do it with hands, so I put a bar and a pinhole in the front here. Oh yeah. You can hear the drag on the rings on the cylinder walls, but that's the way they are when they're brand new. A lot of drag there until they get broke in. Anyway, that's working good. We'll stop number 3 right here. We'll flip her back up again and get into number 3. 2 more to go. Okay, see if we can get piston 3 hammered in there. About 2 thousandths, looking good. We'll get this one finished up now. Okay, no binding or anything. That looks good. We'll get number 4 up before we flip her. And we're ready for the last one. Right on 2 thousandths. Everything was right on 2. Clearances are great. Definitely stiff, but I feel no catches or anything. All there is piston drag. Well, next up we're going to check the side clearance. We have a specification of 5 to 12 thousandths. So you make sure these rods are square, and kind of one way I do that, I'm going to start out with a 7 and see what we got. And I'll kind of go to both sides just to, you know, kind of, it slides in, but I'm a little snug there. And we can get her in there too. So anyway, I would say that one is good and it's square on there. Let's do this one. 7. She goes in, a little snug. I can get her in there too. Okay. About 7 will go in, and we'll turn the other 2 up. Okay, 7 went in there. We'll jump her up to an 8 and see what we got. We'll barely get her in. It's a little tight there, so she'll go in. You just barely go in, a little snug on that one. So I say I'm running 7 to 8 thousandths, which 5 to 12, I'm kind of to the tight side, like that. Shouldn't have no issues with that. Well, to finish up this project, all that's left is to do the fold-over locks. Clearance is all tested good, everything else. It's kind of a, I'm not sure if this is right, but this looks feasible to me or appropriate. But you can see down here the heavy washer is on the cap. Then I got the locking tab here. And the reason I put that on top is that it will cradle in here a whole lot better. If you put it underneath that washer, you got to fold it over that washer and try to get it into here. Put it on top of that washer, it cradles in here nice, and you get a nice fold over on the flat of the nut. So anyway, I got 1 and 4s done. I'll turn her up, get 2 and 3 up, and we'll finish these up. Okay, to fold these over, I take a big pair of channel locks first and get the fold started. These are pretty heavy duty and stiff, so you just kind of gradually work it in there. I'll go back and forth. As you can see, it's coming in. You got to be really square to the flat on the bolt. We'll get her cinched up there with this. Kind of roll her in. Then what I'll do, I'll just take a vice grip and finish cinching her down. Okay, see I got a nice fold square lock on there. That shouldn't come out. I like the way it's cradled in here, flat on there. There's no way that can come loose. So anyway, I'll finish up 2 and 3. The reason I use the channel locks and the vice grip is I don't want to hammer these over and risk damaging my bearings. I think that's a better way of doing it. So let's get this thing finished up. Well, piston, rods, everything been installed. I'm just going to turn this thing over a few times to see what things are looking at from the top side. I've had lots of visuals from the bottom side, so I'll turn her a few spins and see what it does. Definitely have some stiffness with the drag on them pistons and the sleeves, which is normal. You got to expect that. So I don't know. Everything works good. I don't feel no binding, no catches. So anyway, things are finally starting to come together here.